Hello, everyone, and welcome back to 305 Insights. I'm your host, Alan Somerton, and today we're discussing the FSU Seminoles, basically a midseason report, an overall digestion of how this season has gone, and we're also going to touch on the game as well, because, that's one of the biggest games of the year for this program, and it did not go well. So, nothing's pretty much gone well this season, but it's just we got to take a dive into this. And I know we've spoken about a variety of topics in terms of coaching staff, talent, overall demeanor, and outlook of the program. So we're just going to dive a little deeper in that today. So first of all, won 36-14. It was just another abysmal offensive performance by the Seminoles. And once again, offensive line was an abject disaster. Robert Scott had a good game, but outside of him, and those games happen once every season, it seems, for the past 5 or 6 years. But they really struggled to block the defensive line, which is very talented. And the pocket was collapsing all night. The offense didn't surpass 300 yards of total offense once again this season. And they failed to score more than 21 points once again. They haven't scored more than 21 points on U.S. soil this season. And this goes back to when Jordan Travis got injured, that this team hasn't surpassed 300 yards of total offense. They finished with 248 this time. And it's just gotten to a point where you can't even watch the games, which is what my intention is now for the rest of the season. It has been, and I've addressed this on previous episodes of the podcast, that I'm watching this game to see what the future holds for a lot of these kids. And it's getting difficult to even do that because you're just seeing the execution of this offense, leaving the defense out to dry. Wide receivers can't separate. The play calling is mediocre at best. And there's just a lack of execution everywhere. And it almost gets to a point where one of the questions I have as the season progresses is, and these need to be addressed by Mike Norvell and company, how can you judge these QBs in the 2024 offense? The O-line, again, is horrible. The wide receivers are devoid of playmakers, and if they do get open, they don't catch the ball. Malik Benson has been an absolute bust. Kentron Portier, Darius Williamson, all those guys that are supposed to be, fifth-year veterans that came back to offer stability in the wide receiver room, have not taken any progress forward. Hakeem Williams has disappointed as well this year. Alligator arms in one game. This game, he actually had a step on a defender and decided to come and cut back on a deep ball when the ball was over his head. Why would you come back and cut back in when the ball is going to end up over your head? And it went over his head. Let me rephrase that. It went over his head because he cut back into the field. We all know how Kyle Morlock's done this season, and for some reason he's still getting a lot of snaps. And the concerning part is you want the young kids to play, but during the practice week for this week's game against North Carolina, Mike Norvell alluded to a concerning practice that occurred, I believe, Wednesday, that people are asking for more And when they're given the opportunity to get more playing time, they're not showing what they need to show in practice. So all these fans, all these pundits, including myself, that are saying we need to see more of the youngins, free the youngins, as that phrase was going on earlier in the season. You want to see more, LaWayne McCoy, Elijah Moore, BJ Gibson, all these young kids, all these wide receivers, maybe Landon Thomas at tight end or Amari Williams. Folks, maybe they're just not showing it in practice. There's a reason why that some of these guys keep on getting thrown out there. And the sad thing is they may give this team the best opportunity to win. And when you're 1-7, that kind of speaks for itself. Speaking of the QBs, they went 11 of 32 in the UM game for 115 yards and 1 TD. Luke Kromenhoek had 6 of 14 for 61 yards. Brock Glenn, 5 of 18 for 54 yards and a TD. The rushing game looked okay. Again, despite the offensive line not really blocking, the numbers for the running game came out okay. Luke had 11 rushes for 71 yards. Lawrence Toafili had 6 for 26. That's a 4.3 yards per carry average. That, again, somehow he only gets 6 carries. Brock was 5 of 22. Kazeel Holmes finally got some extended playing time. 4 for 15 with a touchdown. It was really good to see that for him because, he was a solid running back last year and he just hasn't had the opportunities this year. And it's understandable because it's a deep running back room, but when Roydell Williams goes down and you don't use Toafili that much and Cam Davis jumps you, there's not really a lot of opportunities, considering we always play behind, to play Kazeel Holmes. So good on the kid for scoring a touchdown in this rivalry game. Ja'Kai Douglas had 1 rush for 0, and Mekhi Denzi saw some action, 1 for -1 yards. Malik Benson had a touchdown in garbage time, but nothing even worth talking about for the wide receivers and tight ends because, again, only 11 catches made. Defense looked okay at best, I would say. They were the ones that really are the first team to technically slow down Cam Ward. You only had 215 passing yards. They were 23 of 36. We'll dive deeper into that on the UM side. But, yeah, Cam Ward didn't have a touchdown. So I guess he slopped. I guess he slowed down one of the top contenders for the Heisman. So, cool. And other than that, you allowed gaping holes for the running game. Couldn't get off the field in third down. They were 8 of 14 UM was on the money down. 3 of 3 on fourth down. And you allowed 31 first downs and 445 yards of total offense. So, again, if your whole game plan was to slow down Cam Ward, congratulations. You were successful, but you still lost the game by a significant margin. And you saw Norvell giving an earful to Adam Fuller for trying to substitute people off when UM has clearly gone on a more up-tempo offensive push this season. And you just can't be rotating defensive linemen every other play. Like, I believe there's the one that he was getting yelled at. I don't know if it was this play, but I know that there was a play where they got called for too many men on the field, and it was 2 plays after a timeout. I think it was 1 or 2 plays after a timeout. And it's honestly, it's just so weird from my perspective that you can't just have like a base package at this point and have these kids playing a sense of like, you're going to be playing a few plays in a row. Like, I'm sorry, this is UM FSU. UM's going to try and push the ball. You guys need to be ready. And if there's a break in terms of an incompletion, because, Maybe throw one of those in there every once in a while where you bat a ball down and create a turnover. But anyways, if there's a point in time where you can get the players on smoothly, go ahead. But trying to rush in between first downs or, long completions on first down to make it second and short or something like that, that's just not going to happen. How do you try and do that with a QB, the talent of Cam Ward, who can see that stuff and see a defensive end, defensive tackle, linebacker jogging off? Take the penalty. See what happens. You get the free down anyways if something bad happens, and it's just, how is this happening? Because then this is clearly the coaching issue. And it's just, we've gotten to the point where you've seen Oklahoma fire their offensive coordinator. You've seen UCF fire their defensive coordinator. Or special teams, or I think it was defensive coordinator. West Virginia also fired their defensive coordinator. I believe Georgia Tech was the one who rearranged their special teams. Outside of Oklahoma, those aren't blue blood programs. But when you see Oklahoma trying to make that statement, and then you wonder why nothing has happened at FSU. And I know the argument is, what's going to change? Which is understandable. But it's more and more difficult to ask and expect accountability from the players when you don't even hold your coaching staff accountable. I've said this in previous podcasts. I'll say it again. I think there are probably maybe 2 people safe on this staff, and everyone else has to go. And it needs to be a clean house, and Mike Norvell needs to make the difficult decision of whether he wants to give up his play calling duties. Because Alex Atkins is the offensive line coach / offensive coordinator, but he does not call the plays. That is all on Mike Norvell. And Mike Norvell has led very successful offenses. He's one of, I think, only a very small group, if the only one, who has led 2 top 4 offenses in rushing and passing. I believe one of them was 7th in passing and 10th in rushing one season. And then one season he had 4th, and then a separate season he had 4th for passing and rushing. So he's done it once in the same season, and then in 2 separate seasons he's been able to do that. But outside of John Papuchis, who's a special teams coordinator / defensive ends coach, and I don't know if you keep him as defensive ends coach, but you definitely keep him as special teams coordinator because he's done a good job with that. That's one of the bright spots on this team. You have a great punter in Alex Mastromanos, and Fitzgerald has come a long way from where he was just a few years ago, where they didn't trust him to kick like 30-yard field goals. And now he, for some reason, doesn't get an opportunity to kick field goals, but even if he does, he's pretty much automatic. And that's a great weapon to have, knowing that you can lean on your kicker in a lot of situations, but unfortunately this offense can barely move the ball past the 50-yard line. The only other person I'll probably keep is Patrick Surtain, if he's, willing to stay at this point, but I think that there's a lot of potential with this cornerback classes that we have coming up, in the sense of, Azaria Thomas has been playing well. Maybe not to the level of hype that we thought he would, but he still is playing well. But you have the young guys, like Quindarius Jones, Edwin Joseph, and then you're seeing the development of Earl Little Jr. at safety. And you have, just guys that are coming up, like the ones from last year where it's, Charles Lester. Maybe he might see the field next year if he stays. But there is a lot of potential in there. And you just got to hope it shows up and shows out. And, you've seen the development of KJ Kirkland as well. Taking over Conrad Hussey for more playing time on the safety side. And yeah, it's just, again, no one predicted this season in the sense of it being 1-7. And it's a season of history. You lost to Duke. You might lose for the first time to Mac Brown. You're staring at the barrel of a 2-win season. And if you manage to beat UNC, you can maybe get 3 wins. But it's just Miami won the Sunshine State battle. They beat Florida convincingly, and they beat FSU convincingly. They also beat USF, Florida A&M. But it's just you have allowed Cristobal and company to build this machine because Cristobal takes recruiting very seriously. And he was getting top 10 recruiting classes with 5-win seasons and 7-win seasons. Now they're going to make the college football playoff, in all likelihood. You, as a coaching staff, went 10-3 and 13-0. 13-1. You had 23 wins in a 2-season span, and you didn't crack the top 10 in recruiting. Mike Norvell says come December, they have a plan. And he's basically admitted they're going to have to dip in the transfer portal again because this recruiting class has fallen off a cliff. You lost your 2 best defensive end, your only 2 defensive end recruits who were high-quality recruits. One went to Texas, and the other one is still considering where to go, but I don't think he's coming back to FSU. You had arguably the second best wide receiver class behind Oregon, and you lost all 3 of those 4-star wide receivers. The 4-star tight end that seems to have a lot of upside has a strong possibility of flipping to Nebraska. And currently, this class ranks, I believe, in the 30s. And that's not even factoring in the cancellation of the tight ends ranking in our recruiting class, Lofton. So once that hits, they might fall even further. So you're clearly going to have to hit the transfer portal once again to try and rebuild, which is crazy to say after a 13-win season, that you're going to win 3 games maybe and then try and rebuild. So it's a lot to process as a fan base because you made this strong push to leave the ACC. You're making these renovations to the stadium that's caused people to either lose their season tickets because obviously you can't sit on certain sides of the construction or near it. But you've also asked people to donate more money / contribute more to the program to keep the current seats that you have. And then you put this product down the field. And you start losing the trust in the coaching staff because they hype this team up so much. And granted, you had other people believing in it. Nick Saban thought this was a talented team. Many pundits at ESPN graded this as one of the best defensive lines in the country. Patrick Payton has lost a lot of money this year. He might have to play another college season. I mean, he could leave. He got some NIL money this year. He could leave and hope to get drafted in the second or third round. But the effort put on by him this season is concerning, to say the least. And it's just going to be interesting to see what his decision is. Marvin Jones Jr. had an interesting game against UM in the sense that he was in the backfield a lot, but didn't really. He had one tackle, I believe, didn't record a sack. I should have checked the numbers to see if he was credited with some QB hurries or different variations that show he did get pressure, QB pressures and stuff like that. Darrell Jackson Jr. had his best game. Joshua Farmer looks like the beast that everybody expected him to, but there's only so much you can do with that defensive line when there's not enough synergy on the back end. Again, linebackers don't really help when the running backs break through. It's just a lot of guys playing for me and not for we, not for the team, not for that logo on the helmet. And I find myself pausing a lot in this podcast episode because I'm very passionate about this team. I've been through a lot of highs, the Jimbo Fisher era. The championship season, obviously, one of the most dominant teams of all time. And that's no hyperbole or, homer bias. Look at the stats. I've been through the lows of the last few years of Bobby Bowden, knowing that a legend was going out not the way that he wanted. I went through the Willie Taggart era. I've gone through now this era of a condensed version of highs and lows. And it's a new era in college football, folks. You're seeing a lot more variance in year-to-year performances for a lot of teams. Ideally, you'd like to think you're one of the Georgias, Ohio States, Oregon. I mean, you could even throw Clemson in there now still, where there's consistently teams that are going to win 10 games. And we thought FSU under Mike Norvell was at that point. You did the climb. You got to the 10 wins. You got to the 13 wins. Now, the baseline everybody thought was, worst case scenario, we're going to have 8 wins this season. This is a bridge year with DJ Uiagalelei. We'll see where we go with Brock and Luke next year. This is supposed to be the fastest, most powerful offensive line that you had. Defensive line was expected to be just as good as last year's, if not better. The coaching staff did not factor in missing on a lot of talent coming in. And that's where the high school recruiting, which we've been pounding for quite some time on this podcast, it needed to improve. The high school recruiting needed to improve because of situations like this. You're not going to bat 1,000 in the transfer portal. You're not even going to bat 500. They were spoiled as a program by the riches of the past with Jaheim Bell, Johnny Wilson, Trey Benson, Keon Coleman, Jared Verse, Jermaine Johnson. There's a lot of that type of talent. Even Tatum Bethune playing a linebacker. Braden Fisk. A lot of talent coming through. But you also had some talents that didn't actually come through as well. You had guys hyped up like Winston Wright, Micah Pittman. Is that his first name or is that his brother's name? But whatever. One of the Pittman brothers. You've had disappointments. Kyle Morlock, last season. And it's just, as a fan base, you want to know where the program's going from here. The snub has clearly had an effect on Mike Norvell's ability to connect with players. Whether you want to admit that or not, or even reference that, clearly he's a different man. You saw it multiple times in the Ewing game, him looking up to the skies, praying to God for some patience or guidance in these dark times. And he's going to have to make a lot of tough decisions. He's brought a lot of these guys along for the ride with him, and he's believed in a lot of them. Maybe not all, but a lot. Wide receivers can't separate or catch the ball. You're going to have to get rid of Ron Duggins. Odell Higgins is a legend, but he can't recruit at a high level anymore with defensive linemen. You're going to have to get rid of him. Randy Shannon, gone. Alex Atkins is a great recruiter, but he's not developing any talent. He says he has a plan for December. We're going to have to see that plan really quick as a fan base, because we know Mike Norvell is not leaving because of that $60-some million cost for his contract. So where does the fan base feel like they need to go from here? A clean house. Will Mike make those decisions? He has to. I'm not even sure if it's going to be his decision. It might come down from the top brass saying, we need you to make changes, man. And he's probably going to be forced to, whether he wants to or not. Somber end to this episode, but it's been a down season for this program. Make no mistake about it, folks. That's it for today's episode. A little longer than I wanted to go on for, but I mean, it's been a long season nonetheless for Noles Nation. You guys know the drill already. The ending of the podcast always goes as the following. You can find us Apple Podcast, YouTube, Spotify. Don't forget to like, subscribe, follow, turn those notifications on. Get those comments going, get that feedback going if you want. Let's hear it. We're definitely going to have a podcast about UM and their point of view of this game and where they stand on this season so far as well. Kind of do an all-encompassing one for UM as we just did for FSU as well. So, and we'll probably dive into some college football general talk before these college football playoff committee polls start coming out. So look out for that content, folks. It's college football season. Despite how somber this episode was, it's nothing better than college football. Thanks for listening to this episode, folks. Thanks for stopping by. And we'll catch you next time here on 305 Insights. Have a good one, folks.